Army Welfare Trust was established in 1971, exactly at the time when Pakistan lost its war with India. There is an inherent formula of military business, which is political power plus economic power is equal to political capital for the military. Pakistan is that in Pakistan's case, the defense budget, which includes military pensions, is entirely provided by the state. Military pensions is one of the biggest bills that the state pays. Now, Shaheen Airline again tried to draw on its strength. The Air Force has X number of pilots. These pilots retire, they need jobs. So why not set up a commercial airline? My name is Ayesha Siddiqa. I'm author of 2 books, but the more known book is Military Inc. Inside Pakistan's Military Economy. Essentially, the book, the first edition was published in 2007 and the second one with added chapters in 2017. The book really looks at military economy theoretically, and I then experiment with the theoretical model looking at Pakistan's case study. So it does both, looking at Military Inc. in context of, in the larger international context, and then looking at Pakistan. Why did I write the book? I was engaged with a project which looked at military business across several countries. And that particular project was trying to look at, military business in terms of corruption of individuals. What I found, however, was that this was really about the relationship between the state and a given military. What was the nature of civil-military relations? What was the nature of control of a civilian state, of its military, and how the military exerted its influence. The formula that I understand, there is an inherent formula of military business, which is political power plus economic power is equal to political capital for the military. This is the formula that works behind it. And what is important to understand is that milbiz is very different from other military budgetary allocations. It's important to understand that when we talk about milbiz, it's not part of the formal defense budget. It's mostly carried out in the name of welfare of soldiers. And number 3, there is very little accountability wherever it happens in the world. I mean, it's the same case if you find it in the United States or the UK, other countries, Israel, Iran, Pakistan, China. So there is a problem here. I mean, this is what I call predatory allocation of resources and using it in the name of welfare of soldiers, but it's really about benefiting the higher echelons. Now, every country's particular method of milbiz varies. I mean, if you're doing it in the United States, for instance, that's more private security, but also the military piggybacking on the private sector, private entrepreneurs to extend its benefits. The same case, with China and Iran, for instance, where milbiz happened, but that was controlled by the Communist Party. In Iran, it's the Revolutionary Guards. So on and so forth. I've identified in my book 6 models, milbiz, linking it with 6 different methods of 6 formulas of civil-military relations, ranging from political control in the United States, to communist states, and then taking it down to, what I call a parent-guardian military formula, where militaries, and that is something which I find is essentially in Pakistan, where military over years has, not been not conducted a martial law after 1999, but has somehow found legal ways to stay in control and become, part of governance. So there is that. That's a parent guardian military. And then you also have, the most predatory form is, personally predatory form is what you find in African countries which are fractured, highly fractured, and where individual combatants then ransack the state, the society to extract benefits. So there are different methods and different formulas of milbis. What I found in Pakistan's case was very interesting, and where I thought was important to study milbis was what happens when politically active, proactive military, which has footprints in politics, which for a long duration has remained a primary arbiter of state and society, decides to predate and decides to establish its own economic base. What's interesting about Pakistan is that in Pakistan's case, the defense budget, which includes military pensions, is entirely provided by the state. In fact, military pensions is one of the biggest bills that the state pays. Now, despite that, the military has established businesses, and there are three methods that they've used. So the institution is involved directly, which is really what I call the Chinese-Indonesian model. So the Chinese and Indonesian militaries, and many in Latin America, that were revolutionary militaries engaged in making were part of the state process. Then later, and the states were weak, financially weak, then had to generate their own resources to acquire weapons, to pay, in some cases, pay the soldiers. So there is institutional involvement. So Pakistani military has that. So there are three organizations, for example, the Frontier Works organizations, the National Logistic Cell or National Logistic Corporation now, and then SCO, which is a communication organization. There are three organizations which involve active duty military personnel that are engaged in corporate ventures. Then you also have hundreds of small businesses, from petrol pumps to business plazas to housing schemes, etc., where military is institutionally engaged. So the cases in which you'll have petrol pumps where active duty soldiers in civvies or in civilian clothes work. So that is basically a transfer of public resources into private. That's important. So that is the one method that Pakistan military uses. Now the second level, which is closer to what I call the Turkish formula. Now in Turkey's case, Turkish military has a foundation called OYAK, and what OYAK does is it invests pension funds into generating businesses. It invests with the private sector. Now that method has also been used by Pakistan. There are four foundations: the Fauji Foundation, which is the tri-service organization. So basically, Army, Air Force, Navy. Fauji Foundation was established in the 1950s with resources, the War Veterans Fund that was provided by Britain and transferred to Pakistan. There was India's share and there was Pakistan's. Pakistan's share was invested by the military in setting up Fauji Foundation, which then further established businesses in both then the eastern wing of the country and western wing of the country. They were into textile at that time, jute, major industries, and that's one. Army Welfare Trust was established in 1971, exactly at the time when Pakistan lost its war with India. And Army Welfare Trust is completely managed by the largest service, which is the Army. Again, in 1977, the Air Force then decided to replicate and established its Shaheen Foundation. And in 1983, the Navy was not to be left behind, and it established its Bahriya Foundation. So there are 4 foundations, and they have made over 50 businesses, major businesses. So from from running farms to private universities to to oil and gas to producing fertilizer to cornflakes. There are 50 businesses, but if you and paints as well. Bahriya Foundation, for example, is into manufacturing paints. Now, what's interesting about this formula is that while in many cases major businesses or where you had major gaps or which were potentially profitable areas like cement manufacture, like cereal manufacture, these were areas where and fertilizer manufacture, where Pakistan being an agriculture country, therefore the military decided its foundation decided to benefit, so they were engaged into that. But also the formula that they use is that when the military looks at its own demand. So, for example, cereal production came from the fact is linked with the fact that because you have a military which is 700,000 strong, which has breakfast, their families. When you talk to the military, they say that own community, the military fraternity, is about 9 million people. A large portion of the middle class and also of the population. So they have the demand, and they looked at demand and at that demand and they got into cereal manufacturing. The same goes for example, insurance. Military is into insurance as well. Then you have, for example, the Air Force. Air Force started its Shaheen Airline. Now, Shaheen Airline again tried to draw on its strength. The Air Force has X number of pilots. These pilots retire, they need jobs. So why not set up a commercial airline? Now, the fact of the matter is that despite having pilots, these were people who were not experts in running a commercial airline, and therefore they ran debt, and later on Shaheen airline was sold to a private company. Sadly, that private company was also not allowed to function because there was pressure in it to hire Air Force pilots, and therefore the company decided to pack up and leave. And then you have a third level. Now the third level is basically individual benefits provided to top ranking officers and even to soldiers. So this is allocation of agricultural land, allocation of urban land, housing schemes, and also selective establishing of businesses by individual high-ranking officers. And in that case, they use their connections, contacts, and in some cases even resources. There is a diversion of all of that towards setting up and running these private businesses.